American military history lost deep in the South Pacific. The team went looking for the wreck of the USS Hornet. The Japanese sank the aircraft carrier in October of 1942.
Imagine leaving your house, locking the door, and coming back 77 years later to find your coffee cup still warm on the table. That is the vibe of the USS Hornet discovery. This 20,000-ton warship was bombed, torpedoed, and shelled until she sank in 1942.
They use armor-piercing bombs. Now, when they come down, you hear them going through the decks, plink, 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 and then when they explode,
By all logic, she should be a wreck. But the footage from 3 miles down tells a different story. It shows a zombie ship, perfectly preserved in a state of suspended animation. Is it the water chemistry? Is it the depth? Or is there something else going on down there? Today, we are diving deep to separate the science from the supernatural. Entering the midnight zone. Let's get the science out of the way so you understand why this discovery is freaking people out. The USS Hornet is resting at approximately 17,500 feet. That is over 3 miles down. To put that in perspective, if you took the highest point of the Rocky Mountains and flipped it upside down into the ocean, you still wouldn't touch the deck of this ship. At this depth, the environment is alien. There is zero sunlight. The temperature is near freezing. Basically, if you were to step outside a submarine at that depth, you wouldn't just drown. You would be imploded instantly. So, here is the catch. When ships sink, they usually break apart. The air pockets inside them burst violently as they descend. The hull is supposed to twist and snap under the strain. But the Hornet? She looks like she gently floated down and parked. This is where the wild theories start to gain traction online. You have people on forums claiming the ship entered a pressure vacuum, or that it's evidence of some Philadelphia experiment-style technology that made the steel impervious to physics. Some even suggest that the ship isn't actually there and what we're seeing is a projection. Yeah, about that. While those theories sound cool for a sci-fi movie, the reality is actually more interesting. The reason the Hornet looks so spooky is likely because she was so damaged when she sank. She was full of holes. This meant she filled with water quickly, equalizing the pressure inside and outside before she hit the crushing depths. She didn't implode because she was already dead, but that doesn't explain the preservation. Why isn't she covered in rusticles like the Titanic? The Titanic is being eaten by a bacteria called Halomonas titanicae. It's literally munching the metal away. But at 17,000 feet in the Pacific, the water is different. It's oxygen-starved. It's cold. It's a desert. There's very little biological activity down there to eat the ship. The Hornet has entered a state of deep freeze. But even knowing the science, seeing it is a different ballgame. When the drone cameras first panned over the flight deck, the operators stopped breathing for a second. It wasn't just metal. It was the stillness. It felt like walking into a tomb that had been sealed for 1,000 years. The ship was perfectly still, but as the drone moved closer to the island, the sensors picked up something that made the hair on the researchers' arms stand up. The glitch in the data. Finding the Hornet wasn't just hard, it was statistically impossible. This mission was spearheaded by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. He had a passion for naval history and the bank account to fund the most advanced private navy in the world. His ship, the RV Petrel, is a 250-foot beast loaded with technology that makes the Navy's gear look old school. But even with billions of dollars of tech, you need to know where to look. And the Pacific Ocean is a nightmare. The problem with naval battles is that they are chaotic. In 1942, there was no GPS. Navigators used the stars and dead reckoning. When a ship is sinking and people are screaming and fires are burning, nobody is writing down the exact coordinates to the 4th decimal point. The researchers had to look at the logs of the USS Northampton, which tried to tow the Hornet. They looked at the logs of the Japanese destroyers that finished her off. And get this, the coordinates didn't match. They were off by miles, so the team created a probability box. This is a square on the map where the ship might be. They sent down the AUV, Autonomous Underwater Vehicle. This is a yellow torpedo that runs on batteries and thinks for itself. It swims in a lawnmower pattern, back and forth, scanning the mud with side-scan sonar. For days, the screen showed nothing, just flat, gray mud. This is the abyssal plain. It's the most boring landscape on Earth. But then there was a glitch, or at least they thought it was a glitch. The sonar return showed a hard, sharp object in a world of soft mud. It wasn't a rock. Rocks are round and random. This object had right angles. Nature doesn't do right angles. The mood on the Petrel shifted from boredom to high alert anxiety. They brought the AUV up and prepped the ROV, remotely operated vehicle. This is the robot with the cameras and the claws. The descent took hours. Imagine dropping a camera on a string from a plane, flying at 17,000 feet and trying to hit a dinner plate. As the ROV hit the bottom, the darkness was absolute. Then the pilot flipped on the LED banks. The gloom retreated and a wall of steel appeared. It was the hull of a carrier. But here's the crazy part. Usually when you find a wreck, you have to spend weeks identifying it. You have to measure the guns, check the propeller size, and argue about blueprints. Not this time. The ROV flew up to the stern, wiped away a little bit of silt with its thrusters, and there it was. A faded gray 8, CV-8, the USS Hornet. It was almost too easy once they found it. It was like the ship wanted to be found. But as they moved from the hull to the flight deck, the vibe changed from scientific discovery to creepy mystery. The deck was covered in artifacts that looked brand new, but one specific vehicle parked near the edge started a massive debate about how it got there. The mystery of the towel. This is the part that breaks your brain. The ROV glided over the flight deck, and the first thing that popped out was the bright yellow paint of an International Harvester aircraft tug. Now think about what this tractor has been through. It was on the deck of a burning ship. It sat there while the ship tilted 45 degrees. It rode the ship down 3 miles, crashing into the bottom. It has been soaking in salt water for 77 years. It should be a pile of rust dust. Instead, the tires are still black. The paint is still yellow. You can read the gauges. The international logo is crisp. How is this possible? This brings us back to the wild theories. There is a persistent rumor online that the metal used in the 1940s was different, that it was pre-atomic steel, which is true by the way, and that somehow makes it immune to decay. Well, it's not that simple. The real reason the tractor looks so good is the paint. That industrial lead-based paint they used in the 40s? It's incredibly toxic and incredibly tough. It basically formed a seal around the metal, protecting it from the seawater. Plus, the rubber tires, high-quality vulcanized rubber, takes centuries to break down in the cold dark. But the tractor wasn't the only thing. The drone found a Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter. The wings were folded back, the canopy was closed. But look closely at the footage. The machine gun ports are taped over. Why? Because that's what they did to keep dirt and salt out of the guns before a fight. That tape is still there. A piece of fabric tape has survived 77 years at 17,000 feet. That is mind-blowing. But the most haunting artifacts aren't the machines. They are the human ones. Inside the bridge, the drone found a kit bag. It was open. Inside, you could see a shaving kit, a toothbrush, a mirror, and get this, hanging on a hook nearby was a towel in the ocean for 77 years. It hadn't disintegrated, it hadn't floated away, it was just hanging there. This has led to some wild speculation that the water inside the ship is stagnant, that there is zero current, zero life, zero anything. It's a dead zone where time literally stops. Seeing that towel hit the crew hard. A sailor used that. Maybe he washed his face just hours before the bombs hit. He left it there, ran to his battle station, and never came back. It turns the Hornet from a cool shipwreck into a crime scene of a tragedy. It forces you to remember that this isn't just a movie prop, it's a grave. But to understand why these men were fighting so hard and why they died protecting this ship, we have to look at the mission that put a target on the Hornet's back. The Hornet was marked for death the moment she launched a specific set of planes that were never designed to fly from a ship. Panic on the flight deck. Let's rewind to 1942. The U.S. is losing the war. Pearl Harbor was a disaster. The Philippines were gone. America needed a miracle. Enter the Hornet. The plan was insane. They wanted to take B-25 Mitchell bombers, massive twin-engine planes used by the Army, and fly them off a carrier. This is like trying to drive a semi-truck off a diving board. The B-25 needs about 2,000 feet of runway to take off. The Hornet's deck offered about 460 feet. Mathematically, it shouldn't work. But they didn't care about math. They cared about revenge. They stripped the planes, they took out the radios, the heavy machine guns, the armor. They even took out the secret Norden bomb sites because they were afraid the planes would crash in Japan and the technology would be stolen. They replaced the expensive sites with a piece of aluminum that cost 20 cents. On April 18, 1942, the weather was terrible. The waves were crashing over the bow of the Hornet. The ship was pitching up and down like a roller coaster, and then the alarm sounded. General quarters. They had been spotted by a Japanese picket boat. They were 650 miles from Japan, way further than they planned. They had to launch now or risk the whole fleet being sunk. The first bomber, piloted by Jimmy Doolittle, revved its engines. The noise was deafening. The pilot held the brakes until the RPMs were screaming. Then he let go. The plane lumbered down the deck. It looked too slow. It looked like it was going to drop right into the ocean. But here's the trick. The captain of the Hornet steered the ship directly into the gale force wind. The speed of the ship plus the speed of the wind gave the wings just enough lift. Doolittle's plane dipped, almost touched the waves, and then clawed its way into the sky. One by one, 16 bombers took off. The Japanese were shocked. They didn't believe American planes could reach Tokyo. When the bombs started falling on the Imperial Palace grounds, panic set in. The physical damage wasn't huge, but the message was clear. We can touch you. The Hornet became a hero ship overnight, but heroism in war comes with a price. By humiliating the Japanese military, the Hornet became public enemy number one. The Japanese High Command basically said, find that ship and sink it no matter how many men it takes, and they meant it. The Hornet survived the raid, but her next battle would see her entire air group wiped out in a matter of minutes, leading to a mystery that still confuses historians. The Lone Survivor. Many people talk about the Battle of Midway as a masterclass in strategy, but what they don't tell you is that for the Hornet, it was a mess. On the morning of June 4, 1942, the Hornet launched her planes to find the Japanese fleet. But the air group commander made a bad call. He guessed the Japanese were heading one way. They were actually heading the other. Most of the Hornet's dive bombers and fighters flew into empty ocean. They ran out of gas. Some had to ditch in the water, but one squadron didn't follow the group. Torpedo Squadron 8, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, had a hunch. He broke formation. He found the Japanese carriers, but he was all alone. He had no fighter protection. He was flying slow, low-level torpedo bombers against the entire Japanese fleet. It was a death sentence, and he knew it. Waldron told his men before they took off, if there is only one plane left to make a final run-in, I want that man to go in and get a hit. 15 planes went in. 0 came back. The Japanese Zeros swarmed them like angry wasps. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. One by one, the Hornet's planes were smashed into the sea. Only one pilot, Ensign George Gay, survived. He hid under a floating seat cushion and watched the battle from the water. Now, looking at this from a tactical view, it looks like a failure. The Hornet's planes didn't score a single hit, but here is the crazy part, the butterfly effect. Because Torpedo 8 attacked at sea level, the Japanese fighters had to fly down to the water to kill them. They were busy. They were low, and they were out of ammo. At that exact moment, American dive bombers from the Enterprise in Yorktown arrived at high altitude. They looked down and saw the Japanese carriers completely undefended. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning wrecks. The Hornet squadron had sacrificed themselves to open the door for victory. But the Hornet didn't get to celebrate. The war was getting darker. The other U.S. carriers were sinking. The Yorktown went down. The Wasp was torpedoed. The Saratoga was hit. Suddenly, the Hornet was the only one left. For 33 days, the USS Hornet was the entire U.S. air power in the South Pacific. They call this period the Lonely Ocean. The crew knew the odds. They knew the Japanese were hunting them, and in October 1942 at the Santa Cruz Islands, the hunters finally found their prey. The attack that killed the Hornet was so intense that Japanese pilots were crashing their planes into her on purpose, but the ship refused to die even after her own friends tried to sink her. A stubborn ship. The end of the Hornet wasn't a battle, it was a brawl. On October 26, the Japanese threw the kitchen sink at her. We are talking about dive bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters attacking from every angle of the clock. It happened fast. A 500-pound bomb punched through the flight deck. 2 torpedoes slammed into her side, knocking out the power. A Japanese pilot, his plane damaged, decided to become a missile. He crashed his dive bomber right into the Hornet's smokestack. He bounced off and exploded on the flight deck. Minutes later, another Japanese plane, a torpedo bomber this time, crashed intentionally into the forward gun gallery. The ship was on fire. She was listing. She was dead in the water. But the crew? They were superhuman. They formed bucket brigades. They fought the fires. The cruiser Northampton moved in to tow her. For a few hours, it looked like they might actually save the ship. But the Japanese weren't done. They launched another wave. They put another torpedo into her. The order was given: abandon ship. Now this is where the story gets weird, and where the wild theories about the ship being cursed or blessed come in. The U.S. Navy couldn't tow her, and they couldn't let the Japanese capture her. The Hornet was full of advanced radar and code books. She had to sink. So the American destroyers USS Mustin and USS Anderson were ordered to scuttle her. They fired torpedoes at their own ship, but the torpedoes didn't work. Some exploded prematurely. Some were duds. The Hornet just sat there. Then they opened fire with their 5-inch guns. They pumped over 400 shells into the Hornet. She was glowing red from the fires. She was riddled with holes, but she wouldn't sink. It was as if the ship was refusing to die by American hands. Eventually, the American destroyers had to run away because the Japanese fleet was approaching. The Japanese destroyers arrived and saw this burning, drifting monster. They considered towing her as a trophy, but she was too far gone. They fired 4 devastating long-lance torpedoes. Finally, at 1:35 a.m., the Hornet groaned. She rolled over and began her long fall to the bottom. She fell for 3.3 miles, and this brings us back to the discovery. Usually, a ship falling that far smashes into the bottom, but the Hornet landed upright. She landed gently. It's almost as if the ocean caught her. 77 years later, when the drone found her, one survivor's reaction to the footage revealed a secret he had kept in his locker since 1942. The legacy of CV-8. History books are cold. They give you dates, coordinates, and maps with red arrows pointing at blue arrows. They tell you who won and who lost, but they fail at the most important thing. They don't give you the smell of the burning oil. They don't give you the sound of metal tearing apart like paper. They don't give you the feeling of the deck pitching beneath your feet as the ocean rushes up to meet you. To understand that, you don't need a historian, you need a witness. That's why Richard Nowatzki is so important. For decades, the USS Hornet was a ghost. This was the ship that launched the Doolittle Raid, the carrier that terrified the Imperial Japanese Navy. But since October 1942, she had been gone. She was sitting in the pitch-black darkness of the South Pacific over 3 miles down. Most experts thought she would never be found. The ocean floor is a haystack the size of a planet, and the Hornet was a very small needle. But a research team, funded by the late Paul Allen, didn't care about the odds. They sent the RV Petrel out to the Solomon Islands. They dropped an autonomous drone 17,000 feet into the abyss. And then, out of the gloom, a shape appeared. When the team confirmed it was the Hornet, they didn't just publish a paper, they did something better. They tracked down Richard. Richard Nowatzki was a gunner on the Hornet back in '42. He was just an 18-year-old kid from Chicago who signed up to see the world and ended up in the middle of hell. When the research team found him, he was 95 years old. They sat him down in front of a monitor. They connected a live feed from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, beaming images from a place no human eye had seen in 77 years. Now think about that for a second. Most people in that situation would break down. Most people would be overcome with grief, seeing the grave of their friends. It's a heavy moment. You are looking at your own past, frozen in time. But Richard? He didn't cry. He leaned in, his eyes narrowed. He pointed a shaking finger at a gun mount on the screen, a 5-inch anti-aircraft gun that was still pointing defiantly at the sky, covered in decades of silt and sea life. "That's where I was," he said. The memories didn't come back as a blur. They came back in high definition. He started telling stories that you won't find in the official Navy reports. He talked about the noise. He said that when the Japanese dive bombers came down, the armor-piercing bombs didn't boom instantly. They sounded like plink, plink, plink. It was the sound of steel punching through the thin flight decks. They had to travel deep into the bowels of the ship before they exploded. He remembered the heat rising through the vents. He remembered the vibration of the ship fighting for its life. But then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He cracked a smile. He looked at the researchers and said, "You know, if you go down to my locker, there's $40 in there, you can have it." Everyone laughed, but that joke hit harder than any sad story could. It was a reminder. We look at black and white photos of these sailors and we see mythical heroes. We see statues, we see the greatest generation, and they were. But they were also kids. They were 18-year-olds who played poker. They wrote letters to girls back home. They worried about the $40 in their locker, which was a lot of money back then, while the world was literally burning around them. That joke bridged the gap between 1942 and today. It made them real. This discovery did something else too. It gave closure to hundreds of families. For decades, the families of the 140 men who died on the Hornet lived with a terrible ambiguity. They received a telegram that said "lost at sea." That's a vague, empty phrase. It implies they just vanished. It offers no place to visit, no grave to mourn at. It's just a void. But now they have a location. They have a picture. They can look at that sonar image and say, "Hi, he is there. He is resting with his ship." The condition of the wreck is what really keeps you up at night. At 17,000 feet, there is very little oxygen. There is no light. The processes that rot metal and wood on the surface don't work the same way down there. The ship is spectral. The drone footage revealed an International Harvester aircraft tug, a tractor used to move planes on the deck. It was sitting upright. It wasn't a rusted pile of junk. It looked like you could hop on it, turn the key, and drive it away. A towel was seen draped over a rack, still hanging there after 77 years. A toothbrush, a coat. These aren't just artifacts. They are moments frozen in amber. The site is now protected by the Sunken Military Craft Act. This is crucial. It means nobody can touch it. No treasure hunters looking for scrap metal. No tourists looking for souvenirs. The tractor, the towel, the toothbrush, they will stay there forever. It is a war grave, and it will remain undisturbed. Some people look at this operation and ask the cynical question, why spend millions of dollars to find a dead ship? Why does it matter? The answer isn't about the metal. It's not about the bragging rights of finding a shipwreck. It's about the memory. We live in a world that moves incredibly fast. We scroll past tragedies. We forget things that happened last week because the news cycle demands something new. We are losing our connection to the past. The Hornet is a permanent reminder of sacrifice. It's a physical object that proves the impossible happened. It proves that ordinary kids stood on a burning deck in the middle of nowhere and held the line. So, here's the deal. We have only explored about 5% of the ocean floor. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own deep seabeds. The Hornet is massive, an aircraft carrier, and she was hidden from us for nearly 8 decades. If a ship that big can hide for that long, imagine what else is down there. Imagine what other mysteries are waiting in the dark. There are galleons filled with gold from the Spanish Empire. There are planes from Amelia Earhart's era. There are submarines that vanished without sending a distress signal. There are glitches in time waiting for a drone to shine a light on them. The ocean is the final frontier. It is the last place on Earth that keeps secrets. And if the discovery of the USS Hornet taught us anything, it's that the deep sea doesn't destroy history. It protects it. It holds it safe in the cold and the dark, waiting for us to be ready to remember. The discovery of the USS Hornet proves that the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting for us to find it. But with thousands of shipwrecks still missing, it makes you wonder, are there some things down there that should remain found, or are there some doors we shouldn't open? Let me know your wild theories in the comments below, and if you want more deep-sea mysteries that defy explanation, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't believe what we find next.